Hello, and welcome to another exciting adventure in the brown bagging at lunchtime. Okay, so I'm being a little goofy today. The reason is, it's the holiday season. And me, I like goofiness during the holiday. So, today we're going to get started, and we're going to first chat with none other than, you're not going to believe this, but returning for another engagement is the one and only Marty.
Wow, you don't even introduce Christine?
I had to just, Christine was here last week.
Okay, so she's old news. I take 1 week off and I get all the stardom. Awesome. Well,
Yes,
I'll welcome
old,
you, Christine.
Not I'm old
It's good
news.
to see you.
Old news. What does that mean?
I don't know.
So,
Well, I hope
guys,
you guys all enjoyed your Thanksgiving, and that kicks off the whole really big holiday season about gratefulness, giving, generosity. This is one of my favorite times of the year.
it's happy holidays.
There you go.
There's some people that would complain about you bringing in the Christmas stuff before December 1st. So for those people, we apologize.
Well, at least wait until after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
In my household, the tree went up the day after Thanksgiving. While all our neighbors went to the store, we put up the tree.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about business storytelling. But before we do, we need to look into our brown bags and see if we have anything unique today. And Marty's reaction tells me that it's time for him to share first.
I've been gone so long. You know what I did, CJ, is I packed up a lot of Thanksgiving leftovers for lunch. But the problem was I have 2 lunch bags here. This one seems to be too hot and this one seems to be cold. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle here. I've got to try to be a little more resilient on how I'm making these lunch bags because this could turn into a very, very long story. So back to you, CJ.
I like what you did there, yeah. So that means it's your turn, Christine. What do you have to say?
Well, I actually packed an old favorite, a repeat of the PBJ, but this time I added some fresh fruit, some new content. So that's what I went with for today.
Fantastic.
And of course,
Yeah.
Aha.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if you own stock in the company.
Not yet. I'm working on it.
There you go.
It's Coca-Cola, I learned.
Well,
oh, really?
Mm-hmm. It's owned by
Aha.
Coca-Cola.
Oh, it's one of their brands, huh?
So,
Okay.
CJ, what are you eating today?
What am I? You know what? I am so busy goofing around with these nifty little things like this guy here. I just have a bunch of characters in my bag today. No food, just characters.
Nice.
That works.
And of course, I can make it snow anytime I want now.
I'm loving it.
This is very light, easy to shovel snow, and I like that.
Yes. Of course, I live in a condo, so I don't have to shovel anymore. It's
I have a very strong wife, so I don't have to shuffle more. Right?
Oh, I like that. Okay, so we need to start talking about story. Not only are we going to talk about business storytelling, but we also want to talk about the fact that with business storytelling, there's a reason for it. And it's because we went through something. We got to the place where we had learned something, we overcame obstacles, and now we need to tell that story to someone else so that they can learn the same thing. And within that is what we call resiliency. Being able to bounce back from overcoming those obstacles and turning it into a real business moment that is very practical and real. Christine, how about you? What are your thoughts when it comes to business storytelling and how it impacts resiliency?
Well, for sure, there's a lot of value in learning stories, not only in your own industry and other industries, because that's how you can be more creative in how you're responding to the problems that are going on. One example would be one of the stories I was reading about was the mood ring, and that person who created the mood ring, he was somebody who read magazines from all over different industries, and therefore he was able to find the material for the mood ring. He had a more creative way for marketing it, and therefore was really successful. Not only that, though, but talking to people from different industries with their stories or from their businesses I'm finding it helps me understand the big picture a lot better. Like when I hear somebody who's gone through something, I'm like, oh, I get it a little bit more. I can identify, I can picture. Sometimes those things that are hard to put a label on, it makes it a lot easier to understand in those storytelling.
Yeah, Marty, it sounds you were nodding a lot with what she was saying. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree, CJ. I agree with Christine, all the things you're just saying. Storytelling is so very important in the business world because it's the stories that we remember, especially stories with a strong emotional impact. They tend to make an imprint on our customers or our employees. And those are the things that make it so memorable. So when you've got a message, you can deliver it dry. You can throw something up on the board behind you, but nothing is as strong as putting it into an emotional story that pulls the audience in and just captivates them and makes them feel like they're part of it. That makes your message so memorable.
I like how you said that because it does draw them in. It does captivate them. As a matter of fact, I think it can influence them as well along those same lines. Somehow, if we have three parts to a story, a beginning, a middle, and end, if the beginning kind of is that hook to grab that business person so they're understanding they're about to learn something, and maybe the middle is about the obstacles or problems that have to be overcome, and then the ending is more climactic as far as what the solution is that we found works, maybe they can remember how that fits in then to their circumstances, remember the story, and use it as a solution at some point.
CJ, I only wish we had an expert. We knew an expert about storytelling in business that we could somehow bring her to the show so that we could, dig into her story and learn a little from her.
Well,
that's my Christmas wish.
Well, let's get wishing. We happen to have a person that this will probably work out well for. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nancy. Nancy understands resiliency, by the way, especially during times of change and adversity. We're talking about a person that can use resiliency to lead themselves to a greater productivity level. Nancy designed this Unshakeable Success. She's a professional speaker. She's an expert on a lot of leadership topics. But when you're talking about dealing with the craziness of everyday life, Unshakeable Success is really the key factor here. If you want to learn how to be resilient, this is it. And I could go on and on about her experiences. She's been on ABC and NBC TV. She's done TEDx talks and so on. But I think without further ado, we should just probably bring her in and say hi.
Delivering the
Nancy, how are you?
The message that resonated.
Hi.
How are you? What a great lead-in from Marty, and thanks to CJ and Christine. Thanks for inviting me. Yes. Stories. I love them. And stories in business. Research has been done that people are 20 times more likely to remember what you have to say if you tell it in the form of a story.
20 times.
20 times more likely. Keep in mind, though, your story has to be relevant to your message. You can't just suddenly start telling a story that you think is funny or that you like to tell. It has to be relevant to your message. And I believe one of the key things is your audience can relate. Marty mentioned an emotional story. You bring in the emotions. Christine, you mentioned the mood ring. If you had just read a story about how the business started and statistics and numbers and business plans, you probably wouldn't have remembered it as much as the story that was told of how the Modern was actually created. So the story has to be relevant.
Right. And I think the story helped me get pictures in my head to remember it more, just like you're describing.
And I'll bet you anything that there's something you relate to in that story, something that the creator overcame, something that the creator had to face, something that the creator was resilient about that you related to. You don't have that same story, but you have the same emotions.
That's
You
a
know,
real
you're
good point.
exactly right. Because in the story, he's talking, what comes out is how when you're manufacturing for something that is a trend, how quickly that can come back and bite you. And so that's coming out in the story. So you're exactly right. That is one of the things I remember, just like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things, Nancy, I want to bring up before we get too deep into our resiliency and the business storytelling, I just want to let everybody know that you do have a website, and I believe it's just your name.com, right? Yeah,
Yes.
NancyDepcik.com. The spelling's right there on the screen. And you also have a little section about your personal development and professional experience, which of course will help everybody that wants to get to know you. And I believe there's a section in there that helps them to understand that you do coaching and keynotes and workshops. So it's a fun way to dive more in depth. But I think you also have a new book out too recently, do you not? Oh, look at that.
I do. And Christine is holding it up. It's called We Wish We Had Known. Actually, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Chicago, never, ever, ever thought I would leave. But I did land in Madison, Wisconsin a few years ago. And I joined a group called Madison Area Business Consultants. We call ourselves MABC. And 30 consultants came together to form this book. What
Wow.
we did is we each took our main tip, our main wish we had known when we were first starting our own business, and put it in the book. Each chapter is only 750 words, and that includes our individual bios. And what it does, it tells you a tip that we had to overcome to start our own business, what helped us to overcome it, and how it might help you going further. So it's almost kind of a go-to book also. It'll talk about branding and conflict in the workplace and strategic planning and mastermind groups and all sorts of wonderful insight.
Yeah, the
Sounds
way
great.
I've been going through it is, this is how we called Nancy back, is because I'd come across through it has all these separate chapters, and each chapter is a perfect read for, it just takes a few minutes to read. Then you have it in the back of your mind, and if you have a conflict issue that comes up or something with your customers, you can remember that chapter is there, and will definitely be a great book to go back to and review when those moments come up. So I'm finding it very interesting, really.
I feel like I need a copy.
And what I like about it too is each chapter is written in a different voice. When we read a book, we get used to that own author's voice and their style. But every time you start a new chapter, it's in our voice, that individual consultant's voice. And I like that variety, and I like the differences in the chapters. And I have to tell you, I almost was not part of this project. We obviously have more than 30 members, so not all members participated. And when we first started the book, I looked at things like I just mentioned. People were talking about a business plan or a mastermind group. It was something you could touch and feel. I talk about change and resiliency. And I said, I don't know if that fits in this book. And it's a very supportive group. And everybody said more than anything, we need that, because when you start your own business or any endeavor in life, we sometimes start to doubt ourselves. Can I do this? Am I smart enough? Am I strong enough? Am I good enough? And how do you keep putting one foot in front of the other to keep going and be resilient and have that belief in yourself? And that's what my chapter is about.
One of the things that I've experienced when I'm coming through to the other side, if there's some intense things that I was working through or whatever it might be, I tend to see that there's a, how should I say this? It's almost like there's a point where you're balancing on the edge and you don't know if you're going to be depressed because of all the obstacles you had to overcome, or if you're going to be happy because things are turning out well. And somehow resiliency is the thing that just helps you to choose to be positive. What are your thoughts on that, Nancy?
The title of my chapter, and Marty touched on it with the brown bags, is starting over from the middle. Because we've all overcome obstacles. We've all come through, whether it be a lost job or a lost love or any number of challenges we have faced, and we have survived them all because you're here today. That's how I know you survived them. So when you come to a point where you're teetering on that fence and you don't know which way to go, this is what I suggest. Stop, turn around, and look how far you've come. Overcoming your past challenges, you have gained a strength, you have learned things, you have encountered things, overcome so much that you now have all of that in your being, in your person, to help you overcome the obstacle going forward. And you know what? A lot of times when we're going through a major change, we say, oh, if I could only go back to the way it was. You can't go back. First of all, so much has changed, and more importantly, you have changed. You are not the person you were back then, and you don't want to go back. You want to take this new strength and this new insight and create something new.
Good point. Yeah.
I find that inspiring word, resilience, to me. Like, I think when you're at the beginning of something, I always have all this energy and I want to get it done. And I am, that will carry me through any sort of obstacles or adversity. And after reading the Starting Over from the Middle chapter, I was like, this is a great word for.
It happens to her sometimes. It's a great word for
when you're on the 11th hour. When you're in that 11th hour. Let me just finish what I said. Blah, this is a great word.
I have to tell you, that's what got me to where I am today, because it's hard for us to remember other major challenges in our life right now with everything else going on. But in 2008, we had a horrible recession. And in 2008, I was a very different person. I had a very different career. I led a very different life. And I lost it all because of that recession. I was in real estate and I lost and by everything, I mean, my home, my business, my savings, my relationship. And when you are in a place when you are facing such darkness, you don't know how you can get out of bed the next morning. And it was only through the resilience that I had built up over years past that I was able to get out of bed. Little by little, you start to meet people. You start to explore different ideas, different things. And that's how I became a professional speaker. I heard about Toastmasters, and so I went to a Toastmasters meeting and started going into contests and winning contests and developing stories about resiliency. And somebody called me up one day and said, I saw you in the contest. What do you charge? I never knew I could charge for speaking. So I started hiring, once you have a focus, things start to fall in place. So I found a professional speakers group. I found a mastermind group. I hired a coach. I took classes and started developing my business. So out of the darkness, when you're teetering on that fence, sometimes we forget the strength we have inside of us. It's all right there. Just have to have a little bit of faith in yourself and surround yourself by the people who will remind you of that.
That's a good point. And, for the sake of time and breaking things up a little bit, I'm going to have Marty introduce our next short segment, and then we're coming right back to speak with Nancy some more. Marty, what do you have to say for us?
I would just say keep in mind that some stories are worth repeating. Let's put it like that. So go ahead, cue up the video. This new prisoner is sitting in the corner of his cell, a little nervous because it's his first night there. It's getting dark and he's a little scared. And off in the distance he hears, 14! All the prisoners are starting to laugh. There's a little silence and someone else yells, 27! The prison breaks up, everyone's screaming, laughing. Again, it dies down. Just then, someone yells, 94! Everyone is laughing so hard. The kid is confused. He doesn't know what's going on. So he looks at his cellmate. He goes, "Oh, excuse me, sir. I don't exactly understand what's happening." And the older cellmate goes, "Look, kid. If you've been in the prison as long as we've been here, we've already heard everyone's jokes and stories over and over again. So rather than repeating them, because we've got them memorized, we just assign numbers to them." And the kid goes, oh, I kind of understand. And he walks over to the door and he clears his throat and he yells out, 55! There's dead silence. He turns to this older cellmate and says, "Oh, what happened?" And the old guy goes, "Look, kid, it's all in the delivery."
Okay, I got to try it. 67!
I think Nancy gave you a mercy laugh there. Excellent.
Marty, that was great. I love your stories, your comic work.
Thank you.
All right, why don't you two dive back in and ask Nancy a few more questions?
Awesome.
Whoops.
So
I said you
all
too,
right,
and
so
I'm back.
Gonna be there.
Okay, well,
So-
I guess I'm here.
All right. So Nancy, I love watching you speak. A lot of people say I love listening to you. I love the messages that you take, but I like watching you speak because you are so animated. You are a lesson for my eyes. I like watching you because I learn from you just the way you lean into the screen, the way you use inflections, the way you use your pauses and stuff like that. So I truly am a student in delivery. That's why I love that joke so much. What are some of the tips that you could give people who just want to share stories? Like they find themselves telling stories and no one seems to care. So what kind of tips could you give somebody?
Thanks for that tremendous compliment, Marty. That is really, I really appreciate that because I've worked very hard on the art of storytelling. I think the main takeaway from this is you have to love your story. You cannot tell someone else's story. You cannot deliver someone else's message. It has to be something you feel deep in your soul. I tell my stories, first of all, they bring back great memories for me. My greatest story that I won a lot of contests with was about my big brother tricking me on my first roller coaster ride. But there's a lesson in it at the end. And you always have to remember your audience. Who are you talking to? It's not what I want to say, it's what my audience needs to hear. So I change my stories depending upon who my audience is. But I think the most important thing is you have to feel your story. You have to love it. It has to be yours, not somebody else's. And you have to want to help people by telling the story. It could be helping people as much as just laughing, like you did with your last video. It doesn't have to be an earth-shattering takeaway message. It could be you just want people to laugh.
There you go.
And Marty does that very well.
Yes,
Well,
he does.
thank you,
Yes, he
CJ.
does.
I have been waiting on this show every week. He has a little comedic moment, and I'm waiting for one that just goes thud, and it just doesn't happen.
Oh man, he's setting that bar high for me, CJ.
Nancy, one of the things I'm curious about, we all know that we have obstacles to overcome in life to become successful. And we know that as we overcome those, we get great stories that help us in business, whether it's a salesperson being able to close more deals, or a leader being able to generate enthusiasm and inspiration, or just motivate people to act or behave differently. When it comes to resiliency, my question is this: how do you use a story about being resilient to get people to understand that they too can succeed beyond what they think they're capable of succeeding at?
Really good question. And I hope this helps. Know your audience. And by audience, it could be you're talking to your team. It could be 50, 60 people. It could be 16 people. It can be an audience of one. Anyone who is listening to you is your audience. And know their pain point. What is their pain point? Is your team suffering from not enough sales? That's their pain point, because that's how they make their money to put food on the table. So you tell a story about resilience that will help them increase their sales so they can make more sales. If it's your child that is not studying as well, then you work to that pain point and how that can affect him or her in their future, and getting what they want in their future by working harder today. So know your audience, know their pain point, and tell a story with emotion that relates to their pain point and how it will help them.
Well, I accidentally blocked Christine, so she threw in another comment here. Obstacles equal great stories, and that's so true. In fact,
Yes.
Rich also had a comment here. Knowing your audience is critical. Getting to know your customer will help you communicate with them more effectively and tell better stories.
Now, I have to tell you, Rich, I know he is in my improv group.
No.
Nice.
I do take improv lessons. It's all online now, but it's a group here in Madison, and it helps you to interact with your audience. It helps you to take the focus off yourself and get your focus on the audience. What do they need to hear, do, or feel at the end of your story, at the end of your talk, at the end of your presentation? It's not about you, it's about them. And improv really helps a lot with taking the focus off of you, being in the moment, listening to them, and addressing what's happening for them, not for what you want to say.
Good
Very
point.
nice. Yeah. So Nancy, you put emphasis on connecting with your audience, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's so important. But we just got finished, or I'm hoping we're finishing this time of Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, right? I'm really hoping. And here we are on a live kind of Zoom kind of meeting right now. But what I'm getting at is, you obviously found another hurdle in your life from speaking to people in person, face to face, then in video. And I find myself sometimes speaking to a group that I can't see the faces. I feed off the energy of the crowd. How do you connect to people and make sure your message is going across well when you can't get that same type of feedback, because of the video instead of a nice face to face?
A hope and a prayer. You are so right. When we went into the pandemic, I think like most of us, I thought it would be 3-4 months. And I said, I'm not doing video. I've studied the use of the stage. I've studied improv. I've started involving my audience. That's what I do. I'm not doing online. 6, 7, 8 months into it, I started looking for classes on, okay, how do I connect online? Because this isn't going away right now. So what I do is I think about someone I want to give my message to. when I'm looking at this little dot and I cannot see anyone else on the screen and there is no feedback. And if you do see screens a lot of time, it's a little black box with their name on it. So you don't even know if anyone's behind that black box. All I can do is I think about who would my message serve? Who would benefit from the story I have to tell? And I picture them in my mind. And that's who I see on the other side of this little white dot. The other thing I've learned, one trick, I don't do it anymore, but I did in the beginning, is you take a picture of that person and you put it on the back of your computer right by that spot. Now, you don't want to put it off to the side because then you're looking off to the side. And you don't want to do that. And you don't want to put it right behind the dot because then you're covering your camera. So you put it off to the side and you actually look at that person. It looks like you're having eye contact on the screens. And sometimes that helps.
Yeah, I like that. A friend of mine does that. He says he takes a picture of his wife and he cut out one eye and he posts it right there. So the lens is her eye.
Oh,
that's great. Yeah. Whatever it takes.
Well,
exactly.
You know, Christine had one more thought here. What are tips for accurately identifying customer or audience pain points? We know what our pain points are, but how do you focus in on the customer and make sure that you're speaking to their pain points?
There's a number of different ways, and it's hard. It's really hard. So, for instance, when I was in person and I would go to the meeting before anyone else got there, and as people came in, I would greet them. And I would say, why are you here today? What are you hoping to get out of our time together? And so that would give me a little insight about who was in the audience. Now what I do is a lot of times I ask for names of people who are going to be in my audience that I could talk to ahead of time. So before I go online, I'll say, before I do my virtual program, can you tell me some people who are going to be in the audience? And then I contact them and I see what their pain points are. It also helps sometimes when you're doing virtual because sometimes you meet a sea of silence, is to put some, for lack of a better word, plants in the audience. So I would ask to meet somebody before my presentation and I would say, this is what I'm going to be presenting. Would you mind helping me by volunteering an answer if nobody else answers? So it helps to get the conversation going. At networking, when we were in person, I always sat in the middle and you listen to people as they go around the room and who they are and what they do. And from that, if they're all consultants, I know some of the challenges consultants face. If they're all speakers, I know some of the challenges speakers face. So by the time I get up to give my own elevator pitch, I already have an idea of who's in the audience. So those are some of the tips.
I think that's a wise tip. That's great.
You know, only because we have such an expert here. Well, I should say only. I have two reasons. We have such an expert here. So I have one other question. The other reason I want to ask another question because it drives CJ crazy because I'm not following the flow. So Nancy, Nancy, when we talk about resilience, I have found myself, and I'm sure many speakers have, when you're talking to a crowd or individuals and you're sharing that story and you just see you're losing interest with them. How do you save grace without just saying, all right, never mind, forget that story and let's switch it to something else? How do you fight through that?
That's hard because once you lose an audience, it's very difficult to get them back. So what I've done, again, this is in person, I would turn it over to the audience. I would say, so right now, give me an idea. Who'd like to tell me what's the number one thing you learned right now that you might start using tomorrow? You don't call on anyone specific because you don't want to embarrass them. I have a tendency, I don't know if this is good or not, I used to be a school teacher and I still teach at Madison College. If I find that I'm losing someone or they're chatty, I just go and I stand right by their table and hope that might intimidate them. But I don't know if that's a wise thing to do. But I do that on occasion. Here in virtual world, it is tough because it's hard not to call somebody out A lot of times I'll resort to give me a virtual hand up if you agree, and try to get them involved that way with doing some movement.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I hope that helps.
That definitely helps. I like some of those ideas.
I just want to quickly go back to Mary's comment here. What are your thoughts about having a plant in the audience to help get things moving?
I do that a lot. And Mary Helen Conroy was key in putting that book together. Yes, she was key in putting that together. Her organizational skills are beyond belief. And I do put plants in the audience, and I did that in person and also virtual because it gets the conversation going. The key is you have to ask for permission. I always ask my contact, whoever hired me. I give them the idea first, and I say, do you mind if I speak to somebody in your audience that can help answer my question or that will get the conversation moving if nobody else does? And then I set up a meeting, coffee, virtual, whatever it is these days, with that person and tell them exactly what I need from them, what I'm hoping they will answer. Well, not that they will contribute. I don't give them the answer. They have to give their own answer, and they have to feel comfortable with it. So it takes a lot of extra work, but I'm telling you, it helps every time. It helps keep the conversation going every time.
I think so, even virtually or in person. I personally feel this. There's always this overcoming the hump of chatting in a response to a live stream or a YouTube and talking up in the audience. So if you have a plant, it's almost like they give everyone else permission to engage, or otherwise just say it right up front. You have permission to chat away or to respond out loud. Maybe you don't want to, but so beyond just a plant is the plant, I feel like, gives everyone permission to do that or kind of breaks the ice.
Yeah.
Well,
and you also have to pay attention to the type of audience. I just gave a presentation to financial advisors or people that were in the financial department of credit unions, and they tend to be numbers people. They tend to be quieter. So exactly what Christine said, when I had a plant in there and that person gave an answer and gave an example of something that I suggested they do, it gave other people permission, and they felt more comfortable sharing what they had.
Yeah. And then just to jump back, am I right that Mary Helen has a chapter in here as well? It's an excellent idea about the 50 cups of coffee. I'm pretty sure that's her chapter.
Yes. Mary Helen arranged the book so that all authors are alphabetical by last name. So I think she's like chapter 3. And this is how I met Mary Helen, was through this group. And she would meet people for a cup of coffee to get to know them. And it's called 50 Cups of Coffee. And she wasn't selling anything. She wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. Just have coffee and let's get to know each other. And that was her business plan.
I like that.
It's great. Yeah.
I can have coffee with Mary Helen.
So Christine, speaking about books and all, you did. Go ahead.
I love books, and this time there's a deep dive on another book that is talking about business stories. And it's interesting because this one, not to give away too much, is about the Slinky. It's ended up being a company run by a woman, Betty James, and she definitely had a resilient or starting over from the middle moment. I lightly refer to it, but if you read the book, you'll get the whole story. This is the second deep dive on Robert Schuch's Why Didn't I Think of That? The book is a collection of $10 million ideas and the people that created them. And while the book was published in 1982 by New American Library, it is worth considering today because the stories really let you glimpse behind the successes to understand the true challenges and triumphs of bringing these budding ideas to market. Are you familiar with the simple idea of Slinky? Richard James was a marine biologist when a torsion spring fell off a shelf and seemed to walk across books and go onto the floor. He took the spring home to his wife and 1-year-old child and said, hey, I think I've got this really great toy idea. He toiled with the idea for 2 years, trying to find the right balance of spring length and materials to make the ideal toy. And finally, when they were ready to take it to market, they took a $500 loan, created the first several hundred Slinkies. Well, they knew that this coil sitting on a shelf wasn't going to sell itself as a toy, that they needed to demonstrate it. So they worked with Gimbals in downtown Philadelphia to get a small counter space to demonstrate their new toy. It was a snowy night, and Betty actually didn't think that there were going to be many people to show up, but much to her surprise, there was a crowd around her husband James as he demonstrated the new toy. Sales snowballed, and the young couple took their profits straight back to the manufacturer to make thousands more of the Slinkies. And the Slinky continued to be successful, picking up advertising through articles with magazines like Reader's Digest and Fortune or the Saturday Evening Post. Just as sales started to stabilize and the couple was getting on their feet, the manufacturer said that they were just going to manufacture the toys for themselves. Fortunately, Betty and James had gotten a patent, and eventually they were able to win in the lawsuit against the company. But in the meantime, they needed to create their own facility. So Richard James went and created his own slinky making machine that was much better than the first one. They actually ended up opening their own factory and creating these slinkies. As sales continued to grow, with demonstration being a key part of marketing, the James industry moved into its own manufacturing facility. Richard James himself became less involved with family life and with the business, and eventually Betty James ended up taking and running the whole business herself. At this time, she really needed to remodel the business and try to get things going again, and she did this by cutting back expenses at work, at home, negotiating with commissioners, retailers, and creditors for when she would actually be able to pay for them, and by taking a huge risk based on speculation alone that some cooperative advertising that she had organized would be successful. She took a huge risk and purchased the supplies for metal and plastic Slinkies. Now, this cooperative advertising, which was a creative idea, was to get advertisers to take their payment based on sales, an increased percentage of the retail sales. And so in that way, she was able to get some working money to purchase the supplies that she needed. This one-woman company grew into a successful company, James Industries, and added to its line of toys through embracing new ideas and inventions like the Slinky pull toy, and through acquisitions. Slinkies today are now owned by Alex Industries Incorporated out of Fairfield, New Jersey, but Slinkies are still manufactured near Altoona, Pennsylvania on the original machine that Richard James created. See you next time on Deep Dive.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway for today was the idea of using some sort of cooperative advertising or creative approach to get, to help you promote your own marketing. I thought that was very creative. And then her resilience.
I like that it's winter time now, and you talked about an invention that makes us think of spring.
Oh, oh. Okay, that one's a true groaner. Nancy, what are your thoughts about this whole idea of, being creative and then having the obstacle of someone trying to steal your invention and still trying to be resilient by bouncing back? Get it? Spring, Slinky, bouncing back. Okay. My jokes don't work. Marty's do, but mine don't.
It's all in the delivery.
I think Christine's story was the perfect one of resiliency. What was her name? I think her name was Betty. Was that his wife's name?
Yeah, Betty James.
Betty. So she had to refigure the company. She had to come up with more money. She had to turn around, take a look at what she has learned so far, and apply it moving forward. She didn't try to go back to what it was before and try to beat it to death. She took a look at what she learned. She built that with the resiliency she had learned, and she moved forward and created still the Slinky product, but presented it in a different way. So that's a perfect story on resilience.
Yeah. Good point.
Christine, did you know you were picking such a perfect story for today?
I don't think. No, I didn't. It was everything came to just to be honest.
It just coiled together somehow.
Oh, man. You're just going to keep trying, CJ.
You know what? I'm going to leave the comedy to you, my man. Listen, Nancy, I know it's late for you and you got to get going. Thank you so much for being a part of our show today. We really appreciate you being here. And hopefully we'll have you back again sometime soon.
Mary Helen.
I really appreciate it so much. You guys are fabulous. I love spending time with you. Have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you. You do the same. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Okay, this has been a really good show for me. I love the fact that everything that she is about gets you to be more solid, unshakable, resilient, so you can bounce back and keep on going and overcome things. And what's the name of the book again that she's got out there?
We Wish We Had Known. Really, you can get that on Amazon. We Wish We Had Known.
Okay, I got to order that today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm putting it on my Christmas list.
There you go.
So CJ, if you're thinking about what's the perfect gift, actually get me both of these books we talked about today. Perfect.
So, Christine, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think that what I took away, what I was hearing, and we didn't say it so directly, is that in the resiliency, there has to be a willingness to change. I heard that kind of come up in the stories a few times, and that was a strong takeaway for me today, is that resiliency is a willingness to change.
There you go.
Marty, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Okay, I guess when Nancy was speaking, like I said, I love watching her speak. What I really got out of this was it's like climbing a mountain, and you're halfway up the mountain, okay, and you're in the middle of your trip. And most of us, what we do is we concentrate on what's in front of us. We go like, I can't make it, and it's easy to get discouraged and beat ourselves down. But occasionally we've got to look backwards and say, look at how far I've come. And then what we do is just take that deep breath, and with that excitement, that emotion, that energy that she has, push yourself and make it to the summit. I just love listening to this woman speak.
Yeah, I like that. Because anything to get us to push forward, regardless of our circumstances, gets us much closer to our overall goal. So that's great. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Glad you joined us, and we hope you have a great holiday season.
Bye-bye for now. Bye.